Kim, what's on your radar?
Well, Robbie, this one actually kind of piggybacks on what you were talking about in your radar earlier today. So I think that we are both very incensed about the continued mandates. So I do want to go over this article by CNBC that came out yesterday titled, "The Pandemic Could End in 2022. Here's what normal life might look like soon, according to medical experts." And normal is in quotes. So get ready for what this is about to tell us. The article says, experts say that COVID will likely lose its pandemic status sometime in 2022, due largely to rising global vaccination rates and developments of antiviral COVID pills that could become more widespread next year, and that the virus will likely become endemic, eventually fading in severity and folding into the backdrop of regular everyday life. Now, I also want to point out that it could also become endemic because more and more people have been infected in the world. And also, Omicron is so far showing to cause mild COVID in both vaccinated and unvaccinated people. So it really could just become like the annual flu. And this article points that out. The article says COVID will probably become much like the flu, which is still dangerous for some people. The flu does kill anywhere from 30,000 to 75,000 people annually in the United States, most of whom are elderly, pregnant women, and even some children. Now, this is extremely tragic, but most of us don't worry about getting the flu. We don't want to get it. We're certainly not seeking it. But when we do get it, we're not worried we're going to end up hospitalized or dead, even though some people do die from influenza. Okay, so once it becomes like the flu, what's life going to be like? Well, CNBC reports that if the virus does become more seasonal, then here you go, Robbie. Wearing a mask on public transit and indoors during COVID season could become the norm, potentially even in offices. Now, many of us wonder if this new norm includes kids. Will children be asked to wear masks every single winter season when COVID is circulating? The 2020 to 21 flu season saw incredibly low rates of influenza, and many people speculate it's because kids weren't in school. They're the big spreaders of influenza. So there's a reason to believe that kids staying socially distanced and probably wearing a mask would, in fact, at least lower the annual influenza rate. But of course, this comes at a cost. Masking children and keeping them socially distanced during playtime certainly seems like it would come with psychological side effects. Thousands of children are hospitalized annually for influenza. Hundreds of them die. The narrative surrounding COVID and the reasons why we've gone through such extreme measures, particularly for kids, is because we don't want them contracting and spreading the virus and potentially killing other people. No one wants to appear selfish, and every life is valuable. So I have to be honest, I do see a future where even with COVID becoming endemic, kids, particularly in blue states, will be asked to mask and socially distance during the winter months. I personally don't agree with this. I think we have to learn to just live with risk, because for me, living in fear isn't much living at all. But I can see a future where masking and social distancing, even for kids in school, is the norm. I also see a lot of people moving to red states because of it. A CNBC article also says annual COVID boosters could become the norm, like flu shots, but fewer than half of all people actually get flu shots each year. So I think another big question people will have is, will these be mandated similarly to the current two-dose regimen? There's reason to believe this may be the case. NYU and the Meta both announced that everyone will need to have received 3 doses of the vaccine in order to attend or work in their facilities. Will this become an increasing trend? Many of us think at some point all of this has to end. People can only tolerate so much and will naturally relax even if the government doesn't. If places like New York and California want visitors to come spend money in their states at their tourist attractions, entertainment, and restaurants, they can't continue to have all of these various different restrictions and mandates. Same with international travel. If countries want visitors from around the world, they're going to have to ease up on these vaccine requirements, especially since the WHO claims studies coming out of Europe are showing the main spreaders of Omicron are young, fully vaccinated people. A lot of young people get vaccinated because they want to live their lives free of restrictions. With unvaccinated people restricted on where they can and cannot go, it's the fully vaccinated young people who are able to attend the super spreader events that have contributed to the super spreading of the new variant. Either way, what's the new norm going to look like? Will people just accept that possibly Omicron or a different future variant has mutated to the point where it's not much more than the common cold? Or will people demand triple and quadruple vaccinations paired with masking every single winter? I think for a long time now, a lot of people have thought the restrictions would end. But time and time again, they've not only not ended, but they've continued to ramp up. So I think it's a pretty reasonable question to wonder what the new norm is going to look like when COVID finally becomes endemic. And if it looks like anything, what this CNBC article is describing, the new normal is going to make a lot of new enemies. So, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm curious, Ryan, from your take, because you're the one with kids, if it became the new normal where kids had to mask every single winter, how do you think parents would react to that?
Well, I think they would revolt, and I don't think we'll get that for that reason, because I think some of this is an emperor's new clothes type of situation where you have support for some of these policies, tenuous right now because we're still, we're seeing a massive surge, we're still in the pandemic, but also because people feel like it's socially what other people are supporting, but it's not as strong as people think it is. So once it starts to crumble, I think it could collapse, even in these blue areas. You're seeing a lot of parents, who are really frustrated at the idea of their kid having to, eat outside in the cold with their mask and take the mask down and eat and put it back, which a lot of kids do, because they've had this instilled in them. So I don't think we'll see, and part of it depends on how the pandemic unfolds. But I don't think parents, blue, red, or otherwise, would tolerate masking in schools becoming endemic.
And it was one thing. I mean, I'm against, and I've been against all of these restrictions for except for the initial 2 weeks to slow the spread. I was against them after that. But there was at least an argument to make that, okay, we need to really mask up, socially distance, lock down, because 10 months from now, we're going to have vaccines, we're going to know a lot more about the disease, and so that's just the period. So you had an end point in mind, but that keeps getting pushed. And now it's just like COVID is never going away. It's going to be with us at least for years, if not forever. And, there will always be some new thing. It might be a new variant or it might be a new therapeutic. There's always going to be, the situation will be a little bit different months from now. But we can't ask people to put their lives on hold, even the people we need to protect, even elderly people. I mean, are you going to say, those of us who have grandparents, they don't have all the time left in the world. Are you going to say, well, yeah, you can't see your grandkids for the next 5 years? They might not still be here in 5 years. The argument for heavily restricting the lives, even of the people who continue to be at risk, starts to fall apart if you're going to say, well, yeah, that's just the rest of your life until you die. I mean, if people who are at risk want to voluntarily do that, okay. But a lot of them are going to say, you know what, I will take whatever some slight small risk there is because I would like to enjoy the time I have left on Earth.
Yeah, I just live in a very, very blue area, and I when I travel around the country, I noticed that, even in D.C. or when I go to Idaho, I've been to Texas during this pandemic, and people are living more normal lives, even in D.C., which is more blue. But L.A., people are not back to normal. I mean, people are really wearing their masks while walking by themselves outside here. So it makes me wonder if the most blue areas in the country, in these big cities, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, if they're ever going to ease restrictions, or if this is going to be every winter, we need to save lives, at least lives from influenza. And so we're going to keep these things going. And, I mean, obviously, it's going to just continue driving people out of these cities. But
you are right. Yeah. D.C. has been terrible and has been relentlessly pro-mask, but the dam has broken here a little bit. And I mean, it's a very young city. It's a very socializing kind of city. People in D.C. I don't think are, even Democrats, even Team Blue people, do not seem, willing to do hardcore shutdowns anymore, and I hope I'm not proven wrong on that sooner or later.
We'll see what that new normal looks like. It's coming.
And we'll have more Rising after this. Thank you for that, Kim. Stay with us.